I think that you'll see continued growth in telehealth, but I think there's going to be some consolidation in the GLP-1 space. I think that there's just a lot of like overnight successes. There's going to be a lot of people that are looking to kind of, cash out and maybe they were in it for the right reason, maybe they weren't. It doesn't really matter. It's like, when business opportunities hit, like you take them and you see kind of where the chips fall.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Compound Wisdom. I'm your host, Steve Sood, and today I'm actually joined by Anthony Kantor from Ivím Health. Now, Anthony actually helped build Ivím Health from the ground up with his brother Taylor and their wives. Not only did they bootstrap from the beginning, but they originally actually started off offering therapies like BPC and really struck gold, obviously, with the GLP business. Now they're going full circle back into the peptides. Now, in this episode, we're actually going to talk about their origin story, the GLP wave, why they kept their providers in-house, and really how AI is going to be better at supporting patient care at scale and what it takes to choose pharmacy partners the right way. Anthony, welcome to Compound Wisdom. Now, I want to start off. You actually have a really, really cool story of how you started in telehealth. I would love for you to tell the audience, that story and how you got into it.
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously a family-owned business. So the way we got going, my brother was in cardiothoracic residency, had some ideas around a telehealth platform. What really kind of kicked it off, though, is my mom was suffering from Crohn's disease. Actually started utilizing BPC 157 in the peptide space, and ended up going to remission on her Crohn's. And that kind of, I think, flipped the switch in my brother's head a little bit in terms of kind of the traditional medicine framework and what other therapies were out there that just not a lot of people knew about. So he called me one day and said, I have this idea for this platform. Really the focus is around, making sure there's accessible options, making sure people kind of know about what the options are. And then also, just building a really good patient experience. And so, my background's in software. I took the, we kind of spun up some ideas, and then over the next, 4 to 6 months, built kind of the technology platform that supports the patient base. And then he kind of built the medical protocols, and we ended up launching in early 22. It's kind of near and dear to us and kind of what's going on in the peptide space right now, considering that's where we kind of got started.
That's awesome. So you guys, between you and your brother, is it your brother-in-law or your brother?
My brother.
Your brother. That's awesome, man. I thought for some reason I was thinking it was your brother-in-law, but you and your brother, you guys have he has the medical side dialed in, and then you have the technology side dialed in as well.
Yeah. And then, we have our wives helped us start the business too. They have, my wife is really was in sort of the influencer marketing space, kind of got us spun up. We didn't spend $1 on marketing for the first, almost 12 months of the business. And
really,
his wife's a PA, so she helped him see patients as we were getting started. So, it was really kind of a good skill set for the four of us to kind of just get this thing off the ground.
Yeah, so diverse, man. Between the skill sets, it's like a literally perfect, few people that have really run the business, especially with tech and the medical side too. That's awesome. So can you talk about how much you guys have scaled, which is a phenomenon itself, but what helped you guys scale and what makes you different from a lot of your competitors?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think when we first got into the business, we had no indication to get into GLP-1s. We were very focused in peptides, doing some vitamin supplementation through sub-Q injection, really focused on bioavailability, those types of things. And really kind of thought we were starting sort of more of a, just a side hustle a little bit and just kind of see where it would go. And right as we went to launch, GLP-1s went on shortage. So semaglutide went on shortage, I think in April. Compounders kind of they knew it was coming and started getting ready in March. And so right as we were launching, our compounders were coming to us saying, hey, is this something you guys want to put on formulary? And it's crazy to say now, but I was absolutely not. I don't want to be a vanity weight loss clinic. I'm not we got into this for, for reasons beyond sort of the vanity aspects. And so, my brother, being the smart one, went out, was doing the research, understood the cardiometabolic benefits of the GLP-1s, sent me the articles, sent me a lot of the data, and we had some conversations. I was like, this makes total sense for us to do, actually. And so we ended up putting on a formulary, and I think we had 15 patients at the time, and 14 of them were probably friends and family. And right as we did that, and I think maybe a couple of days later, we put out a TikTok video, and next thing you know, we had patients sort of flooding in. I think we went from 15 to 150 in the next 30 days. So that's really kind of what jumped us into the GLP-1 space. And then kind of the model just became this how do you go out and build a really, really good patient experience, be really focused on clinical, and then, I guess the ultimate goal is kind of for GLP-1s in our, as we thought about it at the time, was like get them in, help people earn, help earn trust of the patient, and then ultimately try to get them off of medication.
Yeah.
It's get them into additional therapies, potentially some things that are more longevity focused. If they need GLP-1s, absolutely keep them on the medication. If they see benefits in terms of, some of the inflammatory markers, that kind of stuff, then makes total sense. But really it's about just sort of optimizing the health of the patient.
That's amazing, man. I love it. From a technology standpoint, what are some of the things that you guys are working on that really makes you guys, different from a lot of your competitors as well?
Well, I think to start, like the focus was around building just again a really, really good patient experience. And like that was one of the nice things I think of kind of not having expectations and not going out and doing, a venture startup or something like that, is we were able to just be heavily focused on what we thought was best for the patient. And I think that's what enabled us, really early on to grow so quickly. Like the things that we were doing were real. They were relatable. I think patients, kind of came to us and were like, oh, this is like the first time I feel like I'm being seen and heard, and somebody's kind of accepting me for where I'm at and where I want to, and sort of is helping me to get to where I want to go, as opposed to just saying, yeah, you need to get here. Like, it doesn't matter where you start. There's a whole kind of, progression that our patients take with us, and like building that hyper individualized model is what I think enables us to sort of differentiate in the space. But also, the tech stack specifically is really kind of like always being driven to get better at individualization, at touch points, at really just sort of driving the engagement with the patient and making sure that they feel like we're with them at that point in the journey.
Yeah.
Because that's going to lead to optimal outcomes, right? And that's honestly what we're all here to do, is to make sure patients have the best outcomes possible.
Yeah. And one, you mentioned, it sounds like you guys are very high touch with your patients. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And you also have all of your providers in house, which is very different, which I actually love, compared to a lot of the competitors, obviously with your brother being a doctor. Can you touch on that a little bit and why that makes a difference for you guys too?
Yeah. We had a decision, I think, really early on in the business to leverage some of the provider networks, which, obviously doing a really good job in the market, access to patients, and leveraging, a lot of the companies that are out there doing the front end work on the marketing side and driving awareness. But for us, at the end of the day, we knew in order for us to control the entire patient experience, in order for us to differentiate on care, we had to have the providers in-house. And we're fortunate enough to have my brother owns our PC and is able to have that relationship with the physicians and with the nurse practitioners that we work with. And ultimately, that leads to that high touch capacity that we can offer. Like, we're not paying on a per visit basis, for a patient to see a provider. That's it's a B2 employee with us. They're bought into Ivím's protocols. They're bought into the mission. They're bought into, how we feel and how we think patients should be treated. And, ultimately, we think that that's going to be a long-term differentiator for the platform.
That's awesome. Now, you guys obviously do GLPs. Can you touch on some of the other medications that you guys offer or what you're getting into as well?
Yeah, so obviously we have some of the other products that are sort of available in market with NAD plus and Sermorelin. We still do B12 and mic injections and those types of things on the vitamin side. Obviously, really excited about peptides, kind of moving back into category 1, and we'll see kind of how that plays out over the course of the next few months. I think everyone's sort of looking forward to the end of July and seeing what the FDA kind of comes back with there. There's hormone optimization as we sort of see it, or HRT. We'll relaunch our female hormone optimization program here in the next probably about 30 days. We sort of did a beta for the last year, and I think got some really good feedback from the patients that were on that beta. And then we'll also launch male hormone optimization. Getting into those markets, I think, is a natural kind of, movement for us, as it is for, we see it across the industry. I think a lot of GLP-1 providers are kind of moving in that space as well. And then, I think ultimately there's probably some sexual health. There's some, other, more prevalent cash pay options that I think we can get into in a pretty meaningful way. Then it kind of comes down to, how do we want to extend our care model into things that are maybe a little less, I guess, utilized in the telehealth space. And so, always kind of keeping our eye out for what's maybe next, and things that we could potentially leverage. The fact that we have providers in-house can build really robust protocols, and how we can maybe get some additional therapies to market, whether they're FDA approved or otherwise.
Is there any particular the ones that you're talking about that you guys have or that you're looking at?
No, nothing specific. It's just always kind of keeping an eye out to say, hey, this is a differentiator for us in terms of having the provider base. And I think that there's, obviously there's certain things you just can't do over telehealth, but if there are things that we can do over telehealth, then we should be looking at, are there ways we can provide access? I think one of the things we've kind of traditionally stayed away from is becoming a PCP. That's not in our model long term, but is there some bleed over in terms of like concierge care? I think that's a really viable direction for us to take the company in the future because of, again, sort of that high touch aspect. And then all the things that we're doing, with AI kind of on the back end for the provider, from the provider perspective.
Well, we'll definitely get into the AI because that's a huge, especially being a technology guy yourself too. Now, I want you to touch on, you mentioned, you're obviously been beta testing HRT, which HRT, especially for women, as I'm sure you notice, is very complex. Can you talk about like what you've done in the beta test and what are some of the things that you guys have learned?
Yeah, I think some interesting kind of things that came out where we kind of traditionally didn't look at labs as that important on the female side. It's really more about symptomatology and how that kind of progresses, and that comes down to, again, a very high touch. Like, there's a lot of questionnaires. We try to make sure that patients are engaged, but also like find that right balance where like you're not so like inundating them with a new form every 5 seconds. To try to get information. What we found was like patients actually had a little bit more comfortability with the labs being there. And so, I think it's one thing that we were kind of thinking about taking away, so not like taking away in terms of, no patients get them, but making them much more optional. And I think what we ended up with is we had to find a really, more affordable solution for labs in that particular case, when traditionally we kind of had thought they were sort of an afterthought. So that's some interesting just, patient feedback that we were getting as we were in beta. The other thing I think with this is like the black box warning coming off is really opening up the space. That also means that there's like some insurance dynamics that we didn't have to play with last year, that we now have to kind of look at this year as sort of changing the offering a little bit and trying to figure out kind of what that looks like. So those are kind of the two key takeaways as we kind of rebranded the program. But the big thing for us is that we want the care model to kind of stand alone. So all of our membership will now be like one price. Like we had moved our, we had a membership price, and then we had hormone optimization kind of like included the membership and was sort of all one subscription fee. We've separated that out now. So you can be a GLP-1 patient, you can be an HRT patient, you can be, anything within the Ivím ecosystem, and it's still that one price. And then, the medications will be offering at a really, really competitive price through the compounders that we're working with.
Nice. Yeah, we'll definitely touch on the compounders. I call them the Wild Wild West out there. I'm sure you would agree with that statement, but I want you to touch on the lab piece because that's very, very important, especially for HRT. Because I've seen a lot of clients either go one way or the other, where they are very you have to do labs, or a lot of them some of them are going the other way, which is symptom based. What's your standing on it now? Are you a lot more symptom based and labs are optional still, or after the beta test?
Well, I think for female hormone optimization, we're more symptom based. For males, we're more lab. There's a bigger lab focus. Yeah. So it just, and it also depends a little bit on the patient too. Like if we're not getting great answers, or we feel like we can't like get a read on how the patient's really feeling, like labs are, they're one of the things that it's kind of like, it is what it is. Like the numbers come back, you just have to be, as very careful kind of like when you're doing the testing, especially on the female side.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you also mentioned obviously peptides and, the whole thing that's happening in July. What are your thoughts around that? And what are you kind of anticipating happening from that? And then also the time frame. What are you guys thinking, when it's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of excitement. I think what it seems to be is like, BPC is going to be one of the first ones, that would be moved back into category one. Again, the peptide landscape is going to be, I think, as wild as the compounding landscape enables it to be. So I'm sure, as we get into that conversation, a little bit of this will come out too. But ultimately, we started the business around peptides. Like we thought this was going to be
Full circle for you guys.
yeah, right. And we thought this was going to be sort of a game-changing thing for patients to just be aware of. And here we are 4 years later, and people are learning about them, and they're like, it feels like everybody's on them, but they're all on gray market peptides, and they're not on, the peptides that we were trying to promote when we first started the business.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a really interesting battle. Then you also have, the pharmaceutical companies that are kind of arguing against peptides being, available and classified the way they are. So, obviously we'll keep our eye on regulation, but we're really excited to kind of get them launched, and, whatever the FDA enables us to properly compound, we're going to.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's actually talk about compounding. I want you to just touch on just compounding in general, some of the experiences that you guys may have had and some of the pharmacies that you guys work with currently as well.
So from the compounders that when we go to work with a compounder, like we go to we go visit them.
Good.
That's the first thing that you can do is like go do your due diligence on who you're going to be working with and who's going to be providing a medication that somebody's injecting into their body. We also have we have the providers. We also that also means we insure those providers. So we want to make sure we're doing right by them, and we want to make sure we're doing right by the patient, and make sure we go and do the diligence and visit each of the pharmacies we work with. I think that there's as you do that, you kind of get a sense of like who's doing things the right way and who's maybe skirting on what they shouldn't be. And it's the thing we have to realize too is like, these compounders are all regulated. Like the state boards are all going through and monitoring them and licensing them and approving them. They're only doing that, once a year, once every other year. Just depends on kind of the state. At the end of the day, like you just want to work with somebody that you feel comfortable with, that's again, providing these medications to patients, and not going to the space where they're just trying to maximize profits.
Yeah, and a lot of them, it's any particular ones that you guys really prefer working with that you've experienced, or?
I mean, there's a lot of them. We have seven that we work with directly. We built a whole pharmacy algorithm that kind of drives all the pharmaceuticals through our chain of where it goes, how efficient it gets there, making sure patients are getting it as quickly as possible. There's a lot of good ones out there. I don't want to name names because they're all good. The guys that we all work with are all good ones, and
Good.
but at the end of the day, like, you just have to do the diligence and have the conversation with them. And ultimately you'll find the right ones that are doing things the right way. My take on this is stay away from the ones that are doing, anything sort of outside the scope. If you find one compounder that's doing something that a bunch of others aren't, there's probably a reason why. And I think that that's a good indicator of ones that you should potentially stay away from.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned something that we learned, and it made a major difference of actually visiting them and seeing what's going on. And that's huge, man. You get to really make a lot of them, but that's exciting. Now, probably my favorite topic to actually talk about is AI. And you mentioned, obviously, you guys are doing some stuff with AI. I would love for you to touch on that from a patient standpoint, from a doctor standpoint, and then really where you see AI going with healthcare in the next few years as well.
We're doing a lot of work to enable providers. I think that's kind of the biggest focus for us.
Yeah.
We think that the best way to kind of get AI to a place where it can engage with patients is to do it on the back end with providers first, figure out sort of how that scales into patient engagement. And long term, I think we see, over the course of the next 2 to 3 years, maybe a little bit earlier, like there'll be some meaningful conversations that conversational AI is having with the patient. Not to say that that's not back-ended by a provider. I think healthcare will probably be the longest pole in the tent in terms of like a hybrid model where you have AI and human.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Why? I think people in general, like they want that human interaction. Like they I think there's an empathy that you just can't replicate when you talk to somebody over camera, and and have not just talk to somebody over camera, but just talk to a person in general as opposed to an AI. And we all kind of know when we're getting, I mean, obviously we've gotten better. We've gotten much better to the place where sometimes you don't know for chat. But like, it'd be really hard to fake a video visit right now even with as good as the image generation is. And like, you just can't do it in real time either, right? So it's just, there's a timeline in order for us to get there. But I think people want that empathy from another human being. They want to have that conversation, that connection with another human being on their care. Now, I would be totally, I mean, I'm the first person to tell you, I want a provider and I want a really smart, leverage domain knowledge AI, like sitting right next to them at all times. Especially if you go, if I'm sending you a scan, or I'm sending you my labs, or like, there is no reason that you shouldn't have an amazing, domain model sitting right next to a provider that can give context and provide, additional insight into kind of what's going on with the patient.
Yeah, I think what you hit it right on, man. I couldn't agree with you more. It's like people do want that personal touch, and they'll always want that personal touch, especially as AI gets better and better and better. Are you guys doing anything? So you're really focused right now more on providing the providers with more AI tools. Are you doing anything on the patient side as of yet, or?
I mean, we have like kind of your normal sort of like patient experience or customer service type of engagements that are better leveraged through AI, considering time of day and some of the things in terms of just like quickly looking up information that are sort of more rudimentary questions. Our big focus is on the AI, is on the provider side though, where we're building models that kind of in a HIPAA compliant way. I don't think that there's a way to be very HIPAA compliant versus but in a HIPAA compliant way that enables us to look at data, provide context around patient, get that in front of a provider as they're having a conversation. And ultimately that leads to, a much better experience from the patient's perspective, but it also gives the provider just so many more tools to engage with the patient. And, traditionally, if a patient has come in and maybe they've had a little bit of hair loss or something else with a GLP-1, and we've had a GHKCU topical for a long time and have had patients that have had really good results with those. But if they don't, they're combing through the note, if they don't see hair loss as a thing and it doesn't come up in the conversation, like all of a sudden that gets totally lost, and like it's not even an option for them to bring it up to the patient, like, hey, this is maybe an option for you to try, etc. So the AI can kind of like surface those things in real time to the provider, and then like note taking and all of that kind of stuff can be a lot easier. It's much more accurate. So there's just, those are the things we're really focused on within AI right now is just provider optimization. It's also like a patient cohort conversation too, right? I mean, the more patients that you can treat at the level that you think that you need to treat them in terms of engagement, responsiveness, all those pieces, personalization, then the faster you can grow, the more patients that get that experience, the cheaper that you can make it. So all these things become, sort of just, needs as you kind of continue down the path to efficiency. And I think that what we're doing on the provider side will eventually, we sit around a 1 to 1,000 patient cohort. I think we can probably get that to, 1 to 2,000 with what we're doing on the provider side. So it can provide meaningful uplift in terms of efficiency with what we're doing.
Also make their lives much easier, answer a lot of the questions by AI, and then have that human element.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even the like this, all of the questions. It's like, okay, the provider can now focus in on like very specific things because they don't have to worry about all the simple stuff. And, it just gets provided to them like, okay, here's what this is. Oh, you mentioned this. Let me think about that a little bit. Like now I have time to think about it. I had to review your entire chart and remember the entire thing. And then, subsidize it down to something smaller. So it can enable them to do what they're really good at, which is engaging with the patient and having deeper conversation that they may not have been able to before because they're so focused on making sure they didn't miss anything and had all the context.
Exactly. Efficiency has just gone through the roof, man. It's amazing to see where we're at now. It's like every month it just gets better and better and better. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, Anthony, you guys have been, started when telehealth really started to blow up. Where do you guys see telehealth going in the next few years? It's like one of my last favorite questions I like to ask.
Look, I think AI is going to drive a lot of that. I think that you'll see continued growth in telehealth, but I think there's going to be some consolidation in the GLP-1 space. I think that there's just a lot of like overnight successes. There's going to be a lot of people that are looking to kind of, cash out and maybe maybe they were in it for the right reason, maybe they weren't. It doesn't really matter. It's like, when business opportunities hit, like you take them and you see kind of where the chips fall. And I think there's going to be some that are looking to kind of make that move.
Is that something you guys are looking at doing?
No, I mean we're looking at continuing to grow the business,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I think that
I love your brand. You have to.
yeah. Look, I mean, if you're always at the behest of the market too, though, right? Like as a business operator, we're lucky enough to bootstrap the whole company. So
Yeah.
we don't have to deal with investors, and we don't have to deal with the need to kind of show returns. All that being said, like if there's an opportunity for us to bring in partners that are going to infuse capital, that are going to enable us to grow, that are going to enable us to treat more patients, and that are very focused on and heavy on outcomes like we are, that are going to help us produce peer-reviewed data like we have in the past, like all those things line up, then obviously we're 100% open to doing something in that space. But for right now, we're just hyper focused on growing the business and growing what we can do from the patient perspective.
Nice. I want to end this with something that I noticed with every answer, and I love the fact that you answered it this way. But everything that you said is all around patients and very patient focused. And I think that's why you guys are so successful and have done so well, because every single thing that you do, I can just tell from your answers, is all around the patients and how much you guys care for them. So great job, man, and thank you for this podcast. This was amazing.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it.
Thank you.